How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Monday, November 4th. Going through week 9 already. Most of the games done yesterday. We still have one more to get to today, which we will be previewing on today's show. The matchup between the Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be later in the show, closer to kickoff. But to start off the show, we're going to get to the biggest piece of news, obviously, the Saints parting ways with their head coach, now former head coach, Dennis Allen. Also, we're going to be recapping some of the games as we typically do. The Cowboys lost to the Falcons, the Lions and Packers game. All of that is coming up on today's show, so make sure to stick around. But before we do get started, we will mention, as we always do, if you guys want to get involved in the show in any way that you'd like, any question, comment, opinion you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input is always a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that anything you say, any contribution you want to make to the show is featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, use the Super Chat feature to get involved with the show. A lot of things to go over on today's show, so making your voice heard is an easy way to go about that now, and always showing our support. We greatly appreciate you guys for doing that. But with that being the case now, we're going to start off and kick things off with the biggest piece of news, in my opinion, right? Because I wasn't really expecting the Saints to part ways with Dennis Allen, but the news came through this morning, and it was official. You know, the Saints fired Dennis Allen after you could say another embarrassing loss, this time to the Carolina Panthers, 23-22. It is expected that their special teams coordinator, Darren Rizzi, is expected to take over as the interim head coach for a 2-7 Saints team now. The loss to the Carolina Panthers actually marks their 7th loss in a row after their 2-0 start. Obviously, everything about the Saints was great. Everybody was flying high on them. This team looked rejuvenated. The bringing in of Clint Kubiak was, the revelation of the offseason. The Saints were really, just based on, the first 2 weeks of the season, were taking the league by storm. Everybody was thinking that the Saints maybe were going to push for contention in the NFC. They were definitely considered division favorites or division contenders at that point in time, based on their 2 impressive wins over the Carolina Panthers in their first matchup and the Dallas Cowboys. The Saints defeated the Panthers 47-10, and they followed that up with a 44-19 victory as well in Dallas, nonetheless. So that was looking back on it now, that was probably the peak of this Saints season, because unfortunately, their season has been riddled with injuries, right? Because we know about the season-ending injury to Rashid Shaheed. Derek Carr suffered that oblique injury, which kept him out for a few weeks. Their offensive line has been injured. If it's not one guy, it's the other one. They never really had their same cohesive group for a lot of the season, quite frankly. And now Olave suffers his 2nd concussion of the season, and it was pretty severe. Luckily, he's doing all right, just based on the messages he sent afterwards on X and things like that. It looks like he's doing all right, but that was definitely a scary sight in a game that ended up turning out very badly for the Saints and turned out to be Dennis Allen's last game in charge of the team in New Orleans. And with this Saints team, when Dennis Allen was hired to take over the reins over Sean Payton, or from Sean Payton, he was the defensive coordinator, right? And with that title, with that, on your resume, you would expect the defense to at least be comparable or just be a legitimate side of the ball that you could at least rely upon if your offense, which, we look on it now, hasn't really been what anybody expected with Jameis Winston there sometime, with now Derek Carr being brought over. The offense was something that I think a lot of people could have looked past if this defense was, kept to their same standard, at least under Sean Payton. But from the time that Dennis Allen really took over and, the defense, continued to have the same exact group with them over the last few years, they haven't really stayed to that level. If anything, they've gotten worse because this season just alone, they are 28th in total yards allowed per game. They're allowing about 376 yards per game. They're 27th in passing yards allowed per game as well. They're allowing nearly 240 passing yards per game. And also they're allowing 25 points per game as well. And all of those, for a defensive-minded coach, already are against your favor, right? And then you look at those two wins at the beginning of the season as well, and now in hindsight, looking back on it, they don't really help out your case that much, now knowing what we know about the Panthers and how this season is pretty much a wash for them. And the same thing for the Cowboys, right? After their loss, their season isn't looking too great either. And if those are your only two wins, now knowing what we know, it doesn't help your case either, because there's been a lot of other games where you've just been, quite frankly, blown out and also embarrassed. So there's not a lot of positives to take from this season so far for the Saints. So in my opinion, I don't really blame them for making this move. I don't really have a problem with it. Of course, we have a problem with someone losing their job. That's obviously not ideal, but for the requirements of this job and the standard that was set just after the first two games, to have such a significant drop afterwards, someone was had to have been held responsible. And Dennis Allen, now being in his third year here, it's his record speaks for itself. He's 18-25 now in those 3 years. So if anyone was going to be held accountable, it was unfortunately gonna have to be Dennis Allen. And it's, you look at that record and you're thinking, it's obviously not the most flattering, but I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise because this is his second time being a head coach, and not a lot of people remember. I didn't really know, quite honestly, that he was the head coach of the Raiders back in their Oakland days in 2012 and 2014, and he had an 8-28 record there as well. And now I know that's not all him, but of course he's the head coach, and a lot of that falls on his shoulders. So for him to come in with that head coaching record and now for it to turn out like it has, I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise to a lot of people if more people knew that information about Dennis Allen and his previous track record as a head coach. Also, Dennis Allen, just in the first two seasons previous to this one, he hasn't really had too many people on his side. Not a lot of people were clamoring for his name, for him to just be kept as the head coach. There was always doubt swirling around his name. The Saints had their best season last year under him when they finished 9-8. It was pretty bad the first season, and last year gave you a little bit of hope, but now this year, the way it has, peaked so early, and then to just drop off now, like halfway through the year, again, it's just another reason to point out to Dennis Allen as being the culpable one, to be the one to take the blame for most of it now, obviously. And the losses this year have been pretty egregious, just because of the fact that there's been, other than their impressive wins against Carolina and Dallas, looking at some of their losses, taking away the loss yesterday to the Panthers, they've been blown out by the Buccaneers 51-27. Sean Payton came back to New Orleans in the Superdome and pretty much dominated from the word go all the way until the end when the Broncos won 33-10. And as well, just last week, before this Panthers game, they lost 26-8 to the Los Angeles Chargers. Just all, again, not helping Dennis Allen's case too much. So that's where the situation is right now for the Saints. It got pretty bad after those pretty bad losses, and it got so bad that you even got a lot of players related to the Saints, past and former, most notably Cam Jordan, tweeting after the game on how bad the situation really got. He said, "We just lost to the Panthers, ... I love y'all. New Orleans truly had higher expectations and the best of hopes for us. Y'all deserve it." And yeah, just the first statement, right? We just lost to the Panthers, encompasses everything about I think just how everyone's feeling in that locker room. The spirits were certainly down. And, not to throw too much shade on the Panthers, but that's not a team anybody should be losing to. The Panthers have already traded away Deontay Johnson. It looks like they might trade away Adam Thielen. And, they already lost Derek Brown this season pretty early to a season-ending injury. So this wasn't a team that was really playing for much. So for you to lose to them, already having piled up some embarrassing losses, again, it does reach a point in time where someone has to be held accountable, and that was always going to be Dennis Allen. And now, looking at the trade deadline tomorrow, I think the Saints are in an interesting position. I'm pretty sure I saw a report that they're not just going to sell off their entire team, but I think looking at guys like Marshawn Lattimore, he's been in a lot of trade rumors, just even going back to last year. Chase Young is another interesting name for me. And even Cam Jordan, a veteran player who is earning a good amount in salary, I think you might have to consider selling some of them just to see if you can get anything back, because this overall team makeup just doesn't fit anymore. And I think really what was so disappointing was the fact that this defense, I think just now, having the same group there, I think they've just pretty much been exposed this year for being an older veteran team that just has expired or just has outgrown their period, right, of just being a consistently good defense. I think they've outgrown that, and they've just become outdated, and now this year, their defense really just hasn't lived up to the standard, and already having a pretty, a pretty easily just not dependable offense. It looked good in the first couple weeks, but really it was so thin at every position. The wide receivers, there was only really Shaheed and Chris Olave. Alvin Kamara was doing his thing, but once you lose one, or in this case, like they've lost both of them, everything else has just crumbled. Derek Carr didn't have a great game yesterday, throwing the interceptions that led, or throwing a bad ball that led to Chris Olave getting hurt and whatnot. Everything was just, crumbling on offense, and if you don't have that defense to support you, it was never going to stand up. So it all came down this season. 2-7 start now, halfway through the year. Dennis Allen takes the biggest blow, and he gets fired. Now we'll see where this Saints season goes from here on out. We'll see if they make any big moves. I would make 1 or 2 moves just to see if you get something back, but I'm sure we're going to see a lot more during tomorrow when the trade deadline heats up. I'm sure around noon Eastern time, or when there's about a couple hours left. It feels like that's always the case when we're talking about any deadline, honestly. So, yeah, the Saints have pretty much waved goodbye to 2024. So, from one NFC South team, we're going to go to a much positive situation in the Atlanta Falcons, defeating the Dallas Cowboys yesterday, 27-21. And we're going to talk about Dallas, for as impressive as the Falcons were just recently, not only this game was really painted with a lot of self-deprecating mistakes by the Cowboys. Nothing new, but we're going to go over it and recap everything that happened in yesterday's game once we return after our first break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into more of our recaps after yesterday's action, starting off with one of the bigger games just in terms of the outcomes and circumstances of a win and a loss for the Cowboys and the Falcons, because yesterday Kirk Cousins and the Falcons handed the Dallas Cowboys their third loss in a row. 27-21 was the final score, and Atlanta now sit at 6-3, firmly in that first place spot in the NFC South. And the Cowboys, like I said, lose their third straight game and also lose another road game to go to 3-5. And on a positive note for the Falcons, right, for Kirk Cousins, he continues to grow. He continues to impress, especially at home. He had his third 3-touchdown game of the season so far for the Falcons. He's been everything you would have dreamed for when this move was announced, and he's just been exactly what they've needed there, getting the best out of Drake London. It was unfortunate that he got hurt because he started that game off pretty well with an impressive touchdown over Trayvon Diggs. So I feel like if he would have kept going, he probably was in line for a big day, but he didn't come back into the game after going out with a hip injury. But also on that note, he's getting more out of Kyle Pitts. We saw the game that he had last week. He's enhanced the running game even more because of his